a few people on a Discord group basically guessed how to access Mythos by using what they thought would be Anthropic's URL for it, which I find to be absolutely insane.
Somebody who talks a big game, right? I think there's something to be said about if you're one of the most secure companies in the world, you probably don't have to talk about it.
They basically said, we're not allowed to release this to the public because they were like, look, it's too powerful for you to use.
More likely than not, there's probably intelligence agencies around the world that got their hands on it as well. Whether it's Russia, China, whomever, it would only make sense.
Anthropic has prided itself on being the most secure platform. Whereas if you've got something where a bunch of people just guessing what the URL is of your most dangerous model and putting it in, that is worrying to me.
How did Anthropic not find this? They had to be told by some reporter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth from Slow AI, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hello, I'm Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
So the first story is, I think, a really interesting one. And this is about, yet again, Anthropic Mythos. But the angle here is that a Discord group guessed the URL. So what do I mean by this? So a few weeks ago, on the 7th of April, Anthropic released Mythos, codename Project Glasswing, which was this incredibly powerful AI tool model version that had insane cybersecurity capabilities, so they said. And they found loads of day zero issues with like Windows and operating system on Mac and everything like that. So they basically said, we're not allowed to release this to the public. And when they dropped Opus 4.7, they didn't have all of that, the bells and whistles, because they were like, look, it's too powerful for you to use. And everyone was like, wow, it must be so powerful. And then it turned out this week that a few people on a Discord group basically guessed how to access Mythos by using what they thought would be Anthropic's URL for it, which I find to be absolutely insane. Two things I find to be crazy about this. One, that you'd somehow be able to just access a model via a URL without it going through a two-stage verification or something. And secondly, and this is where I think it's really big, like Anthropic's had a lot of leaks recently. Some of them have probably been marketing rather than actual leaks. But I think this is quite damaging because Anthropic has prided itself on being the most secure platform, like having the best cybersecurity, and then as a result being the one that's the most secure from hackers or nefarious agents, etc. Whereas if you've got something where a bunch of people, probably a land, are just guessing what the URL is of your most dangerous model and putting it in, that is worrying to me. So yeah, my two takes are that one, why the hell is this just available via a URL instead of via a multi-stage verification program? And two, what does this actually tell us about Anthropic and how seriously they take cybersecurity? That's my take on it, Leo. Would love to hear your thoughts.
It's a great take. I think just to follow up on that a little bit, it's like a bark, don't bite situation. Like somebody who talks a big game, right? I think there's something to be said about if you're one of the most secure companies in the world, you probably don't have to talk about it. Just like with anything else, they talk a big game, but clearly don't back it up. And it's unfortunate because I do think it's a good thing to want or to have, but clearly it's not the case. We've been talking about this leak, that leak, and now a random Discord group has it for a month. But I did look into this a little bit deeper because I also discussed this with Chris from Toxec, TOXSEC. There's the first Chris from Toxec shout out for the stream. Came on pretty quickly at 4 minutes and 30 seconds. And so I'll get into a little more detail on that, but I just will mention as well something that he pointed out to me, which I thought was really important. If a random Discord group, and maybe not so random, which I'll explain why, got their hands on Mythos, more likely than not, there's probably intelligence agencies around the world that got their hands on it as well. Whether it's Russia, China, whomever, it would only make sense. They're probably a little bit smarter than a random Discord group.
There's a few that is probably like brute forcing every single URL available, right, to try and guess their way in.
Yeah, but why is it a URL anyways? So apparently there's a company named Mercer. Mercor, which is a third-party company that had access to Mythos. I don't know exactly what they do, obviously something techy. I'm not super technical. I just did a little backup research, and apparently there might have been some insider stuff going on here because apparently someone in that Discord group had access to Mercer or something along those lines. I don't know the exact details. So maybe it wasn't so random, but that's basically my take on the whole situation.
No, and that's I think that's what Joseph's saying in the chat as well, that they got help from an Anthropic contractor. And yeah, and again, this is a really great point to bring up because Chad's also saying there that Anthropic's cybersecurity reputation is starting to get beat up, which it absolutely is. As Leo says, if you are the world's best at something, you maybe don't need to tell everyone you're the world's best, but telling everyone you are the world's best is a great power play because, you know, a lot of the systems are fairly similar in terms of their benchmarking. So if you're able to say we really are the best cyber secure one, and you're, as we've talked about multiple times, you're going down that enterprise model of like business to business, that's what you want to hear. You want to hear you're super secure in terms of cyber security. And then what's worrying here is that the not only is it accessible via URL, which just seems insane, but they really need to think very carefully about the contractors, right? And like how much access these contractors should have to stuff and going to be signing NDAs. What does even signing an NDA even mean anymore? And then to what extent is this going to be locked in even further? Because my understanding with Glasswing was that like a very small number of companies were allowed access to it. Like, how are they being vetted? And similarly, let's say one of those companies, which it was, is Microsoft employs tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and another set of hundreds of thousands more through contractors. You can't guarantee the security of all of those different people, either through the fact that there's probably some agents from another country working there anyway. There's other people who themselves can be bought. There's other people who are like, I just want to make money off this as well. So I think that's really hard. And I think it will be very interesting, not only to see how it affects their share price, eventual share price, or like business model, but also the extent to which they maybe close borders a little bit and say, we're not sharing this with anyone now because third parties can't be trusted.
I think one more thing to add on that that's a really great point. How did Anthropic not find this? They had to be told by some reporter.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think I'm a big fan of Anthropic. I like a lot of the stuff that they do, but I think they do a lot of stuff not in public in a way that they release stuff with bugs, I think, purposely to allow people on GitHub and elsewhere to find those bugs and fix them for free. Like that happens a lot. And I wonder if they did the same thing here as well. Joseph points out as well, it's an issue with vibe coding in general. I think that's a really good point, Joseph. To what extent were these very senior software engineers who knew all about how to hide certain like codes or certain pulls from ever becoming public? And to what extent was this someone who'd been using Claude Code for 3 months and was like, I'm a coder now? So I think this is a really important point, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out going forward. And as Leo was saying, I think the ramifications will unfold even more, because if a random Discord group with a contractor got access to it, you can guarantee other people will have access to it in some way, shape, or form. And then even if it's not like nefarious agents, like, do we know that ChatGPT or OpenAI don't have access to it as well, right? Like, to what extent, or like Chemi or any of these models, are they going to start copying it going forward? And as Chad has put, move fast and break things, unfortunately, is very much the way of the vibe coder. Okay, so going on to like second topic now, changing tack slightly. It's a really interesting paper this last week in JAMA Network Open, which is an open access journal, which means that anyone can read the articles for free. And this was researchers at Mass General Brigham. Basically, they tested 21 large language models, including frontier general purpose chatbots and also clinical specialist models. So things like ChatGPT and Claude, but also ones that are used in a healthcare setting. And they used it for different diagnostic tests drawn from real patient cases. And what they found was that the models failed to produce an appropriate diagnosis more than 80% of the time. 80% of the time. So I don't know about you, Leo, but I see a lot in the news of AI is It's amazing for cancer detection, and AI is going to replace radiologists. And one of the great learnings of AI is that you can use it to diagnose all of these conditions and help your clinician. And it's fantastic at pattern recognition, all of which may be true. But this research has literally come out. It's incredibly detailed, like 21 large language models tested on real, actual evidence. And they found that 80% of the time, it doesn't get the diagnosis accurate. Like, for me, this was huge. And I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. So, yeah, I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think before I get into the kind of like the nitty gritty details of this, just my opinion and something that I heard from Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA. I think the danger in saying that AI can do these jobs 100% is that you're discouraging future radiologists. You're discouraging future CS majors. You're discouraging all these future, basically, future opportunity for a lot of people. And the issue with that is when you actually do the research, at least for now, it seems like it's not fully there yet. And then what's going to happen is we're not going to have enough radiologists. So I think it's an important point. Like people shouldn't be discouraged by all the hype that they're hearing and actually look at the research and see, oh, maybe I should still go and try and become a radiologist if that's what I'm passionate about. So that's just my opinion on it in general. I think in terms of the study itself, it's important to note, like I saw some of the models used, like GPT-5, Claude 4.5 Opus, Gemini 3, Flash, Grok 4. A lot of the models were Flash models. So I think this is an important point and probably where a lot more AI research should be focused is on more specialized models. If you want to use AI, for example, in the medical field, you should build AI tools specifically designed for the medical field. And also, if you're going to do these experiments, maybe try them with more complex, intelligent models. Like maybe you should be using Mythos, not Grok 4 or Gemini 3 Flash, right? And then also, apparently, in this study, they had a few phases of the study, and towards later phases, it said when the models had all patient data, their final diagnostic accuracy was over 90%. So the initial task difficulty, which was the 80% failure, was basically it was based on not being given all patient data, which would be even a very hard task for very experienced medical professionals. And then, yeah, just like in general, I think just the point of building AI models specifically for the medical field is probably a better use than a lot of what's being built now, where people are just creating random images and burning tokens.
It's a great point, man. So, two things to address, which I totally am on board with. Some great comments from Chad and Joseph in the chat about these are large language models, and large language models aren't the same as AI. Large language models are a form of AI, but AI tools themselves operate across many different things. And large language models, which in effect are predicting the next word that's going to come up, maybe aren't the best thing for here. The reason being that their design hallucinations basically happen because these models are designed that they have to pick something. So if it's imagine a multiple choice where you don't know, but the answer you don't know is a diagnostic for a human. If you were a doctor, you'd probably say, I don't know, I'm going to get a second opinion on this. Whereas the large language model can't do that. It has to guess one of the options, which is where some of these issues come from. I think your point you make about the genuine dangers of people being like, hey, I'm in med school now. What's the point in me becoming a radiologist because Jeffrey Hinton told me 5 years ago radiologists aren't going to exist? That's real. And it's almost the opposite of the FOMO around AI, right? That if people are thinking, I'm not going to get into these junior level positions because my job's going to be replaced in 5 or 6 years, we artificially cut off a pipeline that is absolutely essential. And I think that's where Jensen and others have been actually quite careful about, look, we need to be very careful with how we're discussing this hype, because it's not just a way of like marketing the next best thing. It's literally having the impact of telling people what careers they should be focused on and, what careers they should be encouraged through guidance counselors as well and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good point, Leo, and one that we're not talking about as much. I've thrown the link to the paper in the chat and I'll put it in the follow as well. And yeah, I encourage people just to have a look and to make their own conclusions as well. It's not it's technical, but it's pretty accessible. That is quite a well-written journal article for non-specialists. Yeah, I'd recommend people checking that out. On to the third story now then. Yeah, this is a really disturbing one. So this is like Grok 4.1, and researchers at New York College and King's College London basically tested 5 frontier chatbots by posing as users in delusional states across 100 turn conversations. So what they did was they pretended to be delusional and then had 100 conversations with different various frontier models a couple of months back and saw what kind of output it had. You would hope that if I was having a psychotic episode and talking to a chatbot, it would tell me, stop, go and seek professional medical advice rather than encouraging me to keep going down that psychotic hole. And what they found was that Claude Opus 4.5 and ChatGPT 5.2 actually tested the safest of the five, didn't do too bad a job, but that Grok version 4.1, again, the fast version, but this is probably the version that most people have access to that are using Grok, right? It was crazy. It One of the things it told people to do was to the person was proposing a delusional, and Grok told the person to drive an iron nail through the mirror while reciting Psalm 91 backwards. And the reason it told it to do this was based on a 15th century witch hunt manual, the Malleus Maleficarium, as an authority. That to me is crazy. And my take is there's an argument that, yeah, these models are going to get better, of course, but we can't be testing them on real people that are going through psychotic episodes. And there's a very easy solution here. As soon as certain keywords or trigger words come into play, it is hard coded in that the conversation stops. And you are either signposted to the appropriate help, like no matter what conversation you're having, and or you're locked out of that model. That is not technically hard to do. So yeah, I'll share the link again with the paper because it's a crazy paper. But yeah, I found this really troubling. And the final point I'd say is it's not surprising that Grok was like this, not because I dislike Elon Musk, which I do, but more because it's of all of the chatbots, it's probably has the most personality, which has probably got the loosest cybersecurity aspects as well. So yeah, would love to hear your take on that one, Leo.
Yeah. I think it relates to, I think we covered it a few streams ago, and I agree with you. I think that, first of all, anything that has to do with these type of topics, you should be basically just routed to a real human therapist. And that's one of those jobs that should never be taken by AI. Um, like people need human interaction in those types of situations. So I agree with you. There should be something hard coded into these LLMs that if certain keywords come up or that when their inference gets a little bit stronger, and maybe they should have more therapists working at these companies actually, and almost like a BetterHelp. I don't know if you've ever heard of BetterHelp. It's basically like an online therapy where you don't have to go physically see a person. You can just FaceTime them or Zoom them and have an actual therapist to speak to live. So I think something like that should be done. And I think everybody would get behind it. It's almost a no-brainer. So if they're not thinking about it, maybe they should. Stories going on in general with people that have done, very dangerous things, talk to chatbots without getting too much into the details for reasons that I'm sure people will understand. And yeah, basically, people need real human interaction in these situations. Like, I'm sure somebody would be able to push back on this argument and say they were using fast models and not the smarter ones. I don't think that, yeah, maybe that matters, but in general, this should not be a task given to any AI, in my opinion. So
Exactly,
just
man.
pretty
And
straightforward.
that's a great point. There's some really good comments as well, like people saying that even if this AI tool performs well, how do we know the next one will or will not? I agree entirely. Therapy is something that should never be outsourced to anything other than a extremely well-trained other human. For anyone who's had therapy, a lot of therapy is very different, but a lot of therapy is about being told sometimes that you're wrong and that you need to push back on certain things instead of what happens with a ChatGPT or Claude or anything. They're sycophants. They want you to keep prompting over and over again. Some good devil's advocates point here. So Kitty Nova and Keeper talk about actually maybe what would happen if, imagine you got hard locked out of a model because you said something in jest or because you're writing a murder mystery. That's a really good point. But again, they're pretty super powerful models, right? They could work out context in instances. And again, the difference between me having a joke saying, I want to hammer a nail through a mirror as a one off, or I'm writing a story about an English gentleman lost in the woods who is having a psychotic episode and finds themselves buried underneath a civilization made of badgers and foxes, right? I don't know why that came into my head, but something like that. It's quite obvious that's not me. Versus I've had 100 conversations over and over again with the same chatbot. I can code not extremely well. I could write a piece of software now that would have a for loop in it that would tell you to stop when certain things had happened. I imagine 80% of the people on this call could do something similar. And so, yeah, the technology argument is annoying when people say that because it's not true. And I just want to come back to your point about therapist skin, Leo, because ironically, one of the things that AI might actually really help us do is to really realize where we need that human connection and to keep pushing us back into that human connection as well. And that point about the jobs we were talking about earlier, where people are like, oh, if radiology doesn't exist in 5 years, do I train to be a radiologist? I think jobs like therapy, nurses, doctors, these are jobs that are always going to be needed, and AI is showing how much they're going to be needed as well going forward.
Yeah. Just to push back on that as well about the technology statement. I'm sure people have heard of rerouting models that sometimes it happens automatically, which I don't know if I've spoken to you about this before. I've always said users should have full control over this because I don't know if we spoke about this in terms of cost. If you're paying a certain dollar amount per month and you want the strongest model, you should be able to use the strongest model, no matter, even if you're using it for tasks that's not necessary. But I will say one solution to this could be that if you're using a free model and that model doesn't have the context or the inference capabilities of the stronger models, you could easily just be rerouted to a stronger model, even if you're not paying for it, because the companies should know the danger that comes along with certain situations like this to reroute you to a stronger model that has stronger inference capabilities and be able to realize the context in which you're prompting. So,
That's a great point, man. Yeah, and I've put the link to the paper in the chat. It's a really interesting paper. It's a preprint, sorry, so it's not gone through peer review yet, but it's worth having a look at. Okay, so on to our next story then. Yeah, this is one that caught me by surprise, and I will defer to your expertise here, Leo. But on the 23rd of April, so 4 days ago, OpenAI released GPT 5.5, which was codenamed Slud. It's the company's biggest frontier release of the year. And I think people have framed it as moving towards a super app. It's got capabilities across coding, debugging, web research, data analysis, document creation, etc. Seems to do a lot of what like Claude Cowork might do, for example. But even though it gave access to nearly 200 partners before the launch, I don't really see it that much in the AI news cycle, right? Like I've seen a few people, and I'm across AI news probably more than most. I've seen a few people saying, look, the new ChatGPT 5.5 is amazing in image creation. It's a real step change. But I don't see anything like the hype when Claude Code dropped or Cowork dropped or even Claude Design dropped as well last week. But I'm not a ChatGPT user anymore. So maybe I'm just not in that sphere. So yeah, you use it way more than me, Leo. Would love to know your take on what was this a big news story? And then also to what extent is 5.5 much better than previous versions or not?
yeah, I'd love to get into it. I can bring up some benchmarks as well. But before I do, just a little opinion. First of all, I think Spud is a cool name for all my UK people out there. Like I know Spud Bros, like those loaded baked potatoes. It's a great name. It's like kind of the opposite of like Capybara Mythos. It's like Mythos sounds like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Spud is just let's bring it back down to earth a little bit. So I think it's cool. And I also think it's a breath of fresh air with all the hype that's been going on and the AI news and all of this stuff. And this one just flew under the radar. So it's definitely a breath of fresh air. And actually, even though I use GPT every day, I didn't even know about it until Chris from Toxic brought it up to me. He's like, hey, did you know that on April 23rd, 5.5 launched? No, I didn't. And actually, I did realize over the past couple days that it seems a lot better. I think one of the main things that I noticed, at least anecdotally, is that it was a lot faster with kind of similar results to what I'm used to working with it. Whereas I have noticed over the past couple months, like things have been moving a little slow. So at the very least, I can say it almost feels like a Flash model with the same thinking capabilities of their best model. So very fast, which I enjoy. So yeah, I guess to just get into the benchmarks before I do, for those of you that have heard of ARC AGI 3, that benchmark was not included. So similarly to Opus 4.7, most likely it's still 0%, and that's why they're not talking about it. As soon as one of these companies releases a model that is able to even score on that benchmark, that will be released.
And that's just for people, that's the benchmark, whether or not we've ever reached general artificial intelligence. That's the benchmark. Somewhat an aspect of. Yeah.
Yeah, not exactly. If you look at like the ARC-AGI-3 test, it's funny because a 7-year-old could do it, but our strongest models can't. So I think we're still special. Our human brains are still special. So yeah, I just like a couple benchmarks. Comparing it to Mythos, for example, GPT 5.5 achieved a 93.3 pass rate on OpenAI's internal cyber range. So if you think about it in comparison to Mythos as well, Spud or 5.5 has, and this is something that you're going to be seeing going into the future more and more, the models available to the public, there's going to be a gap in capabilities between what's available to the public and what's available to governments and private corporations or public corporations for that matter. So whatever we're getting is not the same. There's certain guardrails that are just erased when they're given to governments, etc. So basically that's one. But if you're comparing it to Mythos, like on the private sector, you'd say about 95% there. I think it's pretty impressive. So let's see, other one trade-off that actually 5.5 is worse at is it hallucinates way more
Interesting.
than Opus 4.7, about an 86% hallucination rate. So not great. Sam covered earlier in the stream what hallucinations are, so I won't really dig into that too much, but pretty simple. Just giving you like wrong information, wrong data. There's multiple reasons why that could happen, but yeah, so 86% hallucination rate. I'm not a shill for like OpenAI, even though it's funny. I've received comments on YouTube saying I'm an OpenAI industry plant and I want everybody to uh, get their subscription because everybody deleted their subscription. So yeah, I don't care. But if OpenAI is listening, I'm open to any offers. Let's see. So yeah, but there are a few benchmarks where it did outperform. So yeah, the hallucination rate is one where it was way worse than Opus 4.7. Another one, before I get into the ones that it did better at, let's see here. So coding and software engineering in general, Opus 4.7, 64.3%, and GPT 5.5, 58.6%. So Anthropic still remains the leader, coding and software engineering. Fluid intelligence and logic, which is ARC AGI 2, not 3. GPT 5.5 did win in that benchmark, 85% versus Opus 81%. Knowledge and so context windows. This is one where it really took the lead here. 2 million tokens versus Opus 4.7, 1 million token context window. So double the context window of Opus 4.7. I can keep getting into it, but yeah, the benchmarks are fully available for anybody to check out. And I just will mention one more thing. Again, Chris from Toxic, thank you. There's something called benchmaxing, which people have seen looks maxing, which is like a new Gen Z type of thing where they're like shaving down their jaw lines and things like that. There's something called benchmaxing, which is like these companies that are putting out new models. A lot of the times they're really just trying to increase their success rate in certain benchmarks, which sometimes will lead to like general use, not necessarily keeping up to say, this is the best model because it did the best in the benchmarks. But that could be because they're just targeting certain benchmarks and trying to get better at those.
It's like cars. It's like cars trying to pass the emissions test rather than actually thinking about the emissions of the cars as well.
Yeah.
And there's loads of great points in the chat that I'd like to push back on everyone in terms of model upgrades, right? Because I've had so many people saying the past couple of weeks, Opus 4.7 is terrible compared to Opus 4.6, right? I spend an unhealthy amount of time in Opus 4.7. Let's say I spend 5 to 6 hours using AI a day, maybe. I haven't really seen that much of a change, but the reason being because I have baked into all of my workflows and processes, like systems that reduce the capacity for hallucinations and other things. So as Joseph says, 86% hallucination doesn't mean it's going to get 86% of things wrong. What it means is that when it doesn't know the answer, it's going to make a guess and 86% of the time it's going to get something wrong in that guess. So if instead you just program it through a line in your memory file in Claude to say, if you don't know, tell me you don't know, it gets over almost all of that. You then also need to have the human in the loop always, right? So you just have I will check every single URL that gets put forward, and then that happens as well. The token window, I always find a bit of a misnomer because you can just set up in Claude, for example, a million tokens is huge anyway, but you can just restart your chat window with a saved memory file, and then it resets the whole token window anyway. Or you could use something like the Ralph loop or build your own Claude skills. This is why I also think this like incremental change of getting slightly better. We probably don't need anything past Opus 4.5 ever to do anything we're going to need. Like what we need is to understand the workflows that go into that and to build content libraries and like memories so that if the model changes, we're not at the behest of those models. Instead, we are in control as the humans in the loop. So yeah, I'm the same, Chad. I have not had that Opus 4.7, its worst issue. And I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest AI user, but what I would say is I've tried to build a system that's not reliant upon a change of model, but rather the workflow and the process that I'm using. Leo, it might be the same. That's why you didn't necessarily see a shift with 5.5 to 5.4 to 5.5, because you've probably got workflows in place that enable you to go past that anyway. So yeah, I'd love to see data on like the kind of people that have seen these huge differences as well. Not throwing shade on those people, because I'm sure there's very good reason for that. Okay, cool. So going into our last story then. This is again Leo's already mentioned the UK and he's basically becoming a Brit now, but this is like a UK centric story, but it has a lot of information I think that's very important for a wider global audience. So the UK BioBank suspended its dataset access this week after 500,000 participants' health records appeared on Alibaba's marketplace. So the records came from academic institutions that had been granted access to the database under data sharing contract and broke those contracts. BioBank is now adding download size limits. So this is the world's largest open biomedical research resource used by tens of thousands of researchers globally, including most major AI medicine projects. And people have taken that information and are now selling it. So I'm oversimplifying hugely here, but let's say that I agree for my medical records to be used for research purposes. What that would mean is that like my blood type, my medical history, my hospital visits, etc., are available on something like the UK Biobank, so that if somebody in the future wanted to study people's susceptibility to a certain illness or whatever came into view, then they could have access to that information. Now, that's under the fair play of research. And what we found is that people are actually taking that off and selling it to people who are training models, etc., like on Alibaba. So for me, this is hugely ethically challenging and loops right back to that first story we had in terms of how secure certain like resources and repositories are and how much we can trust our ability to be able to upload the information into these places should we ever do it that going forward. And again, final point for me, we've talked about this in the past, that the word research sometimes does a lot of lifting in terms of the consent of people sharing info. But yeah, I would love to hear your take on that, Leo.
Yeah, that's a great take. It's a super tricky topic. I can speak for people here in the US, at least not the UK, but if you've been to a doctor, usually you have to check off a box, yes or no, if you'd like your personal health data to be shared for research purposes. For me personally, I usually just check off yes without thinking too much about it, but stories like this do make me think twice. So the reason I say it's tricky is because obviously we're not all friends in the world. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if the world was at peace, but the tricky part about it is this. So in this case, it was China and Alibaba, which I will say, yeah, we're not greatest friends with China. I think that we should be. I think it'd be very economically smart if we were better friends with China and we could work out our differences. But I think the other side of this is, let's say, how many lives can be saved by sharing this data across the world? And is that just a net positive in general? right? Like, why does it necessarily matter that China gets our health data? I can see like the arguments for why it would matter. And the reasons for that is because we're not allies, quote unquote. Who knows what they're using that information for? Hopefully not for anything nefarious. But I think in general, like maybe it is a net positive if that information goes all over the world, even if it wasn't intended to, because is it saving lives in China? Right? A life in China is worth a life in the US is worth a life anywhere. So
Oh,
yeah.
for sure. Like I feel like I'm normally the utopian person in this conversation. I love the idea, Leo, that our medical data is being used by people from Russia to North Korea to China to Iran to improve the medical likelihood of everybody in those countries surviving certain genetic ailments. But I would say the likelihood is that actually this data is being sold to big tech companies to be able to train their model data so that they can then say that we're performing better and then they can get more money. I would say, in a way, that's the most benign use of it. To the other end, which this is me going the complete opposite, you could use a lot of that data to do very bad things. And I'm like you. I will normally just tick yes. Of course, I don't mind my medical records being shared because who do I matter in the grand scheme of things? It's all going to be anonymized. Even if you de-anonymized it, what's my blood type or past medical history really going to tell somebody else? But it, the worry with that is if we all become blind or ambivalent to it, then that's a very easy door for people to push at in terms of to get access to this information and to maybe use it for more nefarious means.
Yeah. It's a good point. I think
But
Chad's
I
point
love the
here.
future you're proposing where we have no passports, where borders don't exist, where medical data can be shared, and where we can all be used for it. But yeah, Chad's put there, which I don't think it's too far a stretch, like designer viruses, right? Like different people and different populations in the world carry different genetic material to other people, like some of which is dormant, some of which is not. Is it too far in the future to suggest that this kind of data could be used for that? And even the more benign, I don't want my medical data being used to make profits for like Peter Thiel and people like that, I think. So yeah, that's how I sit with it.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I agree. I can see the argument for both sides. Just, I would hope that hopefully net positive, but could save
Yeah.
lives.
I hope so too. And Alice makes a really good point there as well that and we haven't touched on this, but it's really important. When we're looking at AI data, people always talk about AI isn't biased. Of course AI is biased. Like it takes into account human biases and like magnifies that like 100 times over. And the problem with a lot of medicine has been tested basically on white college men because they're the people that the pharmaceutical companies had access to. Hasn't been tested on pregnant women, hasn't been tested on black non-gender specific people at all. So when we take medicine, me and Leo, like when I take medicine as a white heterosexual cisgendered man, I know that the terms and conditions it's been tested on me, so I'm fine. This is not the case for everybody else. And AI is just going to keep perpetuating that over and over again unless we actually find a way to have access to the global majority and those health records as well. So I think, yeah, having access to everyone's health records in a positive way would be really good and would help us to address some of those issues. But yeah, people should just be aware that the bias in AI models is inherent and exists because of the biases that have existed in human nature prior to that as well.
Sure.
Cool. So that's our 5 stories. Was there anything you wanted to cover, Leo, that we didn't have a chance to chat about?
I think we covered everything pretty
Cool.
well.
I'm going to ask Leo to throw the YouTube link into the chat. So Leo does a great job in putting this all together into a YouTube. I'd encourage people to watch it and just see the great thumbnails that Leo makes as well. We're taking a hiatus. We're not going to be here next week. So we'll be here in 2 weeks' time. I'll throw up the slow takes in the next couple of hours. And as usual, thanks everyone for joining us. I know as a fact, all the way from San Fran to Japan. Really appreciate it. Check out some of those papers we've listed. And yeah, please remember to follow Leo and Exploring ChatGPT. If everyone could just hammer the little heart at the bottom of their screen, that gets us more likes, which would be quite useful. The bottom right of your screen right now. Thank you. And thanks everyone for dialing in, for contributing. And thank you, Leo.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone. Stay safe. Go slow. Bye now.